Hey, it's Kia. And I just spent the last 3 nights and 4 days-ish in intensive care in Colombia and wanted to talk to you about it. Couple things. One, I'm recording this in the middle of the day, so if you hear a lot of papaya, piña, aguacate maduro, that's just people selling very mature avocados in the street. And I wanted to, because this is a special episode, I'm not hitting you with the blah, 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 creative contact, blah, blah, blah. We could be anywhere in the world. Spiel, because it's a special episode, and because it's a special episode, it needs a special advisory, which is, number one, if the talk of needles and injections and things of that nature make you uncomfortable, this is not the episode for you. If the talk of piss and poop and blood and bodily fluids is not your thing, this is not the episode for you. If the discussion of things rather morbid, uncomfortable, and kind of deep discussions are not your thing, this is not the episode for you. But if you are down to talk about all of those things, then I've got quite the story for you. I was thinking the last few days, I was like, man, if I make it out of this thing in one piece, this will make one hell of a story. And I'm excited to share it with you. I also want to say up top of the episode, thank you for all the love that and the support that you guys have shown me. I realized I made a mistake. I should have released this video before I released the post about being in the hospital, because I think people still think I'm still in the hospital, but I'm not. Obviously, I'm here doing this episode for you. And I want to, because if you're just tuning in just for a hot second, I also wanted to say, what type of content creator would I be if I wasn't trying to port my 8 monthly podcast listeners into my career as a famous rapper? So if you're here on YouTube, no matter what podcasting platform you're on, like, subscribe, leave a comment. It helps the algorithm. I've got to plug it. And we're sponsored today. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm going to take advantage of your sympathy while I got it, and try to get some podcast subscribers out of it. So thank you for tuning in, for real though. So I want to Quentin Tarantino this thing, where I'll tell you up front what the punchline is, and then we'll give you some context and tell you the full story. But what got me here this time, I ended up in the hospital because of drugs. And that's what we ended up figuring out by the end, it was drugs. But how we got there, I think, needs a little bit more context. And this story actually starts back when I was a kid in 6th grade, when I was in a skiing accident. And I ruptured my spleen off of a ski jump. And that night, I'd had another spleen growing up, so I wasn't allowed to play contact sports. But I ended up rupturing my spleen, and a couple strokes of good luck that night. One was I was skiing with 2 buddies, and so they were able to go down and find the chaperone of the ski club, for the ski club in middle school, and the chaperone happened to be my dad that night. And so my dad ends up coming up, finds me on the slope, and shout out to Cody Medrick, Andy Mosier for going down to tell my pops. Still appreciate you guys. And then I get rushed to the local hospital. They're like, I think this needs something more specialized, and they rushed me to another hospital in an ambulance. I'd also got a concussion that night when I crashed, so I just have little flashes of that night. But I do remember some vivid feelings that I encountered again recently with this kind of recent adventure of those, the fear and other kind of things that play into it that I'll talk about in a little bit. Anyways, after that accident, I'm in intensive care in the States for 5 days, and they figure out that something's really wrong with my blood. And I have these really low platelets. Before, I'd thought it was maybe because of the spleen, but I still have them. I have a partial splenectomy, which means they cut out part of my spleen and they put some little screws in there to stop the bleeding. So I still have part of the spleen, but we aren't exactly sure what's going on, but at least they saved me, and it's cool. Fast forward, next chapter. Throughout that whole childhood too, after the whole spleen thing and before, I saw a hematologist, and they're like, Kia, you can't drink because you have low platelets and alcohol's a blood thinner. And so growing up, if you ever gone out together, if you ever partied together, I don't really drink. Fast forward past college and until about 10 years later, I'm about 24, 25, and I'm in Philadelphia. And I still don't exactly know what's going on with my blood. I get tested maybe once every 6 months or so and see what's going on, but don't really have an answer for it. And so I end up living in West Philly near University of Pennsylvania, which is like one of the like leading medical research institutes. And so I'm like, this is my time to figure out what's going on. Have a bunch of different tests done, including one which is like a bone marrow biopsy where they take a needle that's like about that big, or at least it felt like it, and they stick it into your spine. It has to be a big needle because it has to go all the way through your skin, through your bones, into this middle of your spine to get your bone marrow so that they can analyze your genetics. And they figured out that my actual blueprint for creating blood cells was messed up. And so it wasn't having to do anything with the spleen or whatever, just the way my blueprint, when my body makes blood, it makes just crappy blood and low platelets. It doesn't quite get the proportions. It doesn't get the ingredients right. The chef's cooking up the things in my body they don't get the ingredients right. And it's related to, by the end of it, that all the results were inconclusive. And the doctor said, Q, we don't really know what this is, but it's two options. Two ways this could go. One, we don't know really what it is, but you could grow out of it, which is cool. Bad news is it could go south, and you could end up just hemorrhaging internally or in your brain if you don't keep an eye on it. So things could go south. So every few months, get your blood checked just to make sure. They did also figure out it was X related. So I was through my mom's side. It's through an X chromosome. And that it was just luck of the draw. My brother doesn't have it. I just got the lucky card and happened to get this weird genetic blood disorder. But I didn't think too much of it back then. I mean, I was bummed, but it was also one of those things, which I'll talk about a little later on, that's kind of a nice wake-up call. Same as with the crash, with the accident before, to just say, hey, kind of pull you out of the matrix a little bit. And after I got that diagnosis, I was 24, 25, I quit my job. I went to bartending school, and that was kind of the beginning of the end of normal life for me. And pretty soon after that, I wanted to take the music more seriously. So I realized that we're all dying slowly. And so that when I started the digital nomad journey, and that was about 4 years ago. Fast forward into last Wednesday night, I wake up and I feel some like pressure in my stomach. And I'm really cold, like those kind of like cold sweats where you can't get warm, even though I was putting more blankets on and stuff. Thursday, I have a bad headache. I wake up with a bad headache and just don't feel great. So I go to the store. I just walk to the store in the morning, and I walk to the pharmacy, and I wanted to get some drugs because I asked the pharmacist, I was like, hey, do you have anything for a headache and for anything for like a stomach ache? And she gave me a few different options, but they all had, and none of like the name brand things were here that I could find. Like I've been looking for Tums for weeks, couldn't find them because I love Tums. And then also they don't have like Tylenol or Advil. It would be all these other brands that might have the active ingredients, but a lot of them had caffeine, and I don't like caffeine. It makes me jittery. I don't take caffeine. And so I was trying to find drugs without caffeine. Ended up finding one that was acetaminophen straight, and then for the stomach, I bought some Alka-Seltzer because it was a one name brand I recognized. And I was like, oh, I know that's like, take that as for your stomach, whatever. And weeks before, I'd got some muscle relaxers I'd had some pain. I'm talking about boxing training, recommend some muscle relaxers, which I'd taken before to help me sleep. And so that day, I ended up taking a little drug cocktail of acetaminophen. I don't even know how to say it in English anymore. Whatever the active ingredient is in Tylenol, some Alka-Seltzer, an Alka-Seltzer pill, and then later in that afternoon, evening, to deal with like the pain, I was just like something that was really tight. I took the muscle relaxer. Friday morning, wake up, feel great. I'm like, cool, we're set, no problem. But that morning, Friday morning, and this is when it starts to get a little bit TMI, is I'm a regular guy, meaning, I use the bathroom same time pretty much every day. I'm a part robot, so I eat pretty much the same things every day. And so I do my normal thing in the morning. and I noticed that my stool is different. Um, and as a guy, I don't know how girls feel about this. As a guy, like we check that. I feel like it's like a cool morning accomplishment. I'm like, I made that with my body, and I start off the day right. This, though, I was like, something was weird. It was black, and it was almost like it was like sticky, like almost like tar. Like it one of those things where I was like, this is weird. But I know that things like Pepto-Bismol and things of that nature can change the texture of your stool too. So I was like, not really sweating it too much. I was like, didn't think too much about it. Went about my day. Friday felt great. Crushed a hard legs workout. Everything was cool. Little bit of kind of pain in my stomach again after lunch, but nothing crazy. And then Saturday, I wake up and I feel weird, just really weird. And again, the weird stool stuff. I was like, that was when it really kind of started popping my radar. I was like, what's going on? And so I go to boxing training that day, and I just, I can't jump rope for like more than a minute, and I feel like I'm winded. My boxing trainer shows up. I do a little bit of shadow boxing, barely. It's like I'm having a hard time doing that. We run a drill for maybe a minute or two, and I'm gassed. Like it's hard for me to even keep my hands up in like an offensive position. And I'm like, hey man, I was like, I honestly can't do today. I was like, let me buy you breakfast. Sorry if you're wasting your time. Let me buy breakfast. We'll just chat and chill for a second, but I ain't got it today. And I just felt just so weak. It was really strange. And also because of the stool stuff that morning, I Googled what makes your stool black. And it was like, these are different foods, blah, 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 blah. One was blueberries. I eat a lot of blueberries. So I was like, okay, I'm not eating my blueberries today. I'm not taking any drugs today. We're just going to roll and see how it goes. That day I ended up just reading a lot because I just like don't have it in me. And I realized when I start to like sit up, I might feel like a little bit lightheaded. And again, I don't think too much of it, but I noticed something's different because normally I can eat a lot. I'm like a bottomless pit, and I can only eat maybe like some of what I'm eating before I get this like stomach pain. I have to like lie down. So I'm like, something is just off. I don't know what it is. To be honest, because I was so winded from the boxing, I thought I was actually COVID. Maybe I was getting COVID again. That same kind of a weird feeling if you had COVID where you just feel off. Sunday morning rolls around, and Sunday morning, like clockwork, I chat with my buddy Dave. He lives out in Asia. He was 12 years. We're 12 hours apart. So I wake up my Sunday morning, I go on a long walk. I don't work out that morning, and I go to the grocery store, chat with Dave, and I can't make it to the grocery store without needing to like sit down and take a break or come home. I get my grocery, I'm walking home, I have to like sit and take a break. And I'm a dude, I'm a pretty active guy. So I'm like pretty bummed. I'm like, I don't know what is going on. Out of breath, just talking to Dave, walking into it from the grocery store. Get home, put my groceries away, and I try to eat some breakfast. I try to have one of my favorite breakfast, just meals in general. It's like fruits, and it's like a banana, it's an apple, and some pineapple, and some rice cakes with peanut butter. It's like I love that. Like I can eat bananas and rice cakes with peanut butter all day. So I make it through like half the banana and half the apple and like one rice cake, and I feel like full, and I'm like that pain, that pressure in my stomach, and I'm like, what is going on? I have to go lie down. I'm like, half a banana. I was like, what is happening? So I Google again, what makes your stool black and sticky? And that was the key, because that was when all of the results popped up. And if you have any medical experience, you've already known what this was. It didn't even occur to me. All the results pop up that it's like, normally when your stool is black and sticky, it's a sign that there's been internal bleeding of some sort in your kind of I believe it's like upper gastrointestinal area. And the reason it's black is because the bleeding has happened and the blood is already oxidized. So by the time it goes through, boop, 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 the rest of your digestive system, it comes out, and it's that viscous kind of texture, but it's not red anymore. And so that's why it never really occurred to me that like maybe I was bleeding or not. And so at this point, when I look at the all the signs, and they all kind of point to yes, I realize I've been possibly internally bleeding for about 2 or 3 days, and that's why it's gotten kind of progressively worse. But it's been kind of like a slow, it's like a slow kind of downward slope, and I'm like, might be a good idea to go to the hospital just to get this checked out. But it's a WebMD, so no matter what you Google on WebMD, you're gonna die. So I try not to think about it too much. And so, but I don't even clean up the kitchen. Like, I don't even. I think I'm gonna go for like an hour to the hospital. So I get like my hat, I have my little like wallet, jacket, and shoes, and that's it. I don't bring anything. I didn't even clean the kitchen up. I thought I was gonna be back in an hour. Go to the hospital and go into, it's a Sunday afternoon, so there isn't really, the only thing they have is urgent care. And I show up, I wait in my little line, I talk to the nurses, I'm like, hey, I have this going on. When I Googled it, it was like the internal bleeding thing. I was like, I think this is what it might be. They're like, cool. And then they lead me to the place where like the real nurses are, and they ask for a stool sample, give them a stool sample. And they have me kind of like sectioned off the place where it's almost like they have these recliners set up. They're like these big chairs, but they're only partitioned off by like a curtain. This isn't like a real section for anything. This is almost like in between, like kind of emergency waiting room and like other real stuff. But I'm in there. The lady next to me has had some crazy operation or something. She's like missing part of her arm. She's crying. The person next to me, other side of me's had something crazy going on. I'm sitting there, and the nurse comes in, and she like has like a gown. I'm sitting there. So all I've done, I'm still in my like citizen's attire, whatever you want to call it, like casual clothes. And then she comes in with like a gown and like the little thing with like blood pressure. And she's trying to tell me, she's like trying to tell me something, but I can tell she wants me to stay. And I'm like, I'm feeling lightheaded, a little bit of pain in my stomach, but nothing crazy. And I'm like, I'm not trying to stay here. So I'm a little bit resistant to it. And she's like, I don't quite understand what she's saying. But then she gets like a doctor woman to come in, and the doctor woman speaks some English, and she's like, no, she's like, you're staying. She was like not very friendly. She was like, this is what it is. And I was like, can I just go home and get my things and come back? She's like, no. And then she left, and in Spanish, she was talking to her. She's like, why are you here if you don't speak Spanish? And I was like, I'm sorry. I speak some Spanish, I promise, but I'm just not medical Spanish. And I could tell she was not thrilled. I was like, I guess I'm not the only gringo to come to this hospital who doesn't speak a lot of Spanish. I text my buddy Vlad, who lives in my building, shout out Vlad one time, and he brings me my backpack with some things. I'm like, dude, thank you so much. Sorry to be a pain in the ass. I'll be out like tomorrow, and I don't know. I'll take you for a slice of pizza or something. Like, I'm sorry about the headache. He's like, no, it's all good. I go back. I sit in my little recliner thing. She has me changing my hospital gown. I'm still wearing my hat, and I'm wearing jeans and like a hospital gown, and I'm like just texting on my phone. And then I'm just sitting there and thinking that this could go. This doesn't feel crazy serious, but like maybe it could be the start of something serious. But I start to think like, it's crazy. I'm starting to feel myself here again. Like the kind of that little bit of tension, little bit of fear. I think of it being like, maybe this is something a little bit more serious than I thought. So I'm sitting there in a chair, and I just decide, I'm just thinking about life and how we ended up here, whatever. And excuse me. And I sort of feel just tired, and I'm like, I'll just close my eyes for a second. Close my eyes for a second, and then I feel a prick in my arm, and I wake up, and I'm on my back. And it's one of those like from the movies where you wake up, and it's like all the nurses' faces. It's like the light above you, and all the nurses' faces are like looking over you. And I just wake up like that, and I feel super lightheaded, almost like I'm floating. I like that thing where I'm like, whoa, like you're almost like not even there. And all the nurses are speaking really fast in Spanish, like, ¿Dónde tú vas? ¿Qué pasa? Like, where did you go? Where are you going? And there's one doctor that speaks English, and she's standing over me, and she asked me how I feel. And I remember I just said, tengo frío. I just remember I'm cold, and just really lightheaded. And they're trying to, I feel that the prick on my arm, and they're trying to put, they're trying to either get blood or give me some sort of an IV. I can't really figure it out, but they keep poking me like with the needle, and I'm kind of like there, but I'm not. It's really hazy, and they can't seem to get whatever they were looking for in these veins until finally they poke me like 3 or 4 times, and they can't figure it. They can't get anything. And then there's a doctor there who speaks English, and she comes over and she's like, "Turn your head to the side." I turn my head to the side, and they jab me in the jugular. And so a lady just stabs me with a needle in the neck. And I'm not sure I still have like the scar from it, but she jabs me with a needle in the neck, and then they're like, "Cough, cough, cough." And so I'm like, I'm like trying to cough, and apparently they get what they need from the jugular. So that's like the one vein that ended up working for them. They lift me onto like the little stretcher bed thing, and they tilt me back, I think, so more blood can go to my head. And I just remember feeling, it's kind of that like I feel like you're drifting, where you're kind of like in and out a little bit. And I just remember feeling really cold, where I'm so cold my teeth are chattering and I'm shivering. And I'm not sure at this point if it's because of lack of blood or also because I'm scared, but I feel so cold. And they wheel me off to another room. In that other room, they another doctor comes in. Apparently, I switched to another doctor. She comes over, and again, they're trying to poke me in all these places, and they can't seem to get any blood from all of it. And so I'm not exactly sure what happened. But so on this hand, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. On this hand, I'm not sure if you can see it. I got poked like 5 times, 6 times on this hand. Boom. And then 5 or 6 times on this hand. A bunch in like your little like elbow hole, opposite elbow little crevice. So they're poking me with all these needles, and they can't seem to find any veins that work. They bring in like a guy who's supposed to be really good at finding blood or something. He can't find anything. And then they bring in like a lady who's supposed to be really good at finding stuff. And she ends up, they poke me all these different times. They can't seem to get it. I'm shaking. And she ends up using one on my foot, and it hurts like hell, but it ends up working enough to they kind of like can get me kind of like stable to come over. And the doctor's like, "Hey," she's like, "You've lost a lot of blood. We're gonna give you a blood transfusion, but I just like, can I sign this document like on your behalf?" I'm like, "Please." She signs the document, and then a little bit of time passes. I'm still super cold. I'm kind of in and out of it, and the guy brings over some bags of blood, and they inject the blood, I think, into my neck. I don't really remember. I just know that I had a needle in my arm, a needle in my foot, a needle in my neck. Well, they used one of the three to get me some blood again, and I started kind of like level out a little bit. And then it's an interesting element of kind of the difference, I think, between my experience with hospitals in the States and here in Colombia is the way the payment works. And so at this point, when I'm sitting in the chair, right when I arrive, a guy comes over, he's like, "Hey, if you're going to stay the night, we need you to like, you can choose between these different rooms, and we're going to need to charge you at least 1,000,000 pesos, which is, I think it's like $250. I was like, "Okay, fine. It's cool." I pay up front. Boom. After I get the blood transfusion, they get me stable, and then another little lady comes in with a credit card machine, and she's like, "Hey, we're going to need to charge you again for this and that." I was like, "It's totally fine." I just like pointed the thing. I'm like, "There's my credit card." I'm still like kind of out of it. Charge me again. It's all good. And then I start to kind of like level out. I start to like regain, like I'm not so fuzzy anymore. And at this point, I don't know, maybe it's 8 p.m., something like that. And they're like, "We're going to transfer you up to the intensive care unit because we need people to like keep an eye on you throughout the night." I'm like, "That's cool." So they wheel me through up into this intensive care unit room, and they give me another bag of blood, and I just kind of pass out that night. I'm just out of it. That morning I wake up, and that's the day that we're going to do the endoscopy, which is the thing where they, I didn't know what it was, but pretty much they put a camera down your throat, search into your stomach and see what's going on. And so they They give me that morning another bag of blood and like a bag of platelets, like super platelets, so that I don't bleed or anything. I have the I just pretty much, I'm laying in bed that day. I'm connected to all these different machines, and um, there's a nurse on duty that morning who is like I name her like my guardian angel, and she's just like super sweet to me the rest of my time that I'm there, because it's like intensive care. Pretty much every shift, every 12 hours, the people change. So it's not like I really get to like, I'll like go to sleep at one point and like wake up and like all the people attending me are like different people. So you don't really get to like make those cool relationships really, except for this woman. She's kind of like one of like the head nurses, and she speaks a little bit English, and so she'll come in. She's one of the like rock stars for my stay there. She came in, she like checked on me every time, and she was just like kind of like small and just so sweet. One of those people that's just so sweet, and make sure everything's okay. And so pretty much that morning, I'm kind of in and out of it, but that afternoon, I have the endoscopy. They hit me with some morphine. They bring this big machine into the room, and they put this tube down into my stomach to see what was going on. Not comfortable, but it wasn't the end of the world either. And they don't find anything. They're like some of the tissues on your organs seem really thin, but they're like, there's no cause for bleeding here, so we're gonna need to do a colonoscopy. I'm like, okay, that's fine, whatever we got to do. So that ends up being that afternoon. And then the people change like their shift again at maybe like 7. I think the shifts are like 7 to 7. And so the people change again at 7. And I just know that Tuesday I'm going to need to get a colonoscopy. And the gastroenterologist dude comes in and he's like, hey, you're going to have to drink some of this weird stuff. But he's like, it's for the procedure. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Didn't know what I was agreeing to. That night they changed shifts. And around 10 or 11 p.m., the nurse lady comes in, and she mixes me up this batch of like what has to be the most terrible thing I've ever drank before. And it's not like a cup of it. It's like one of those big 2 liters pitchers that like your grandma would make like iced tea for you and the family in, for like the whole family, like one of those big 2 liter pitchers filled. It's with this orange liquid. And I remember when I was young, I'm not sure if they had this wherever you're from, but in the States, they had this 2 liter soda, orange soda called Slice. I remember it was delicious. And me and my buddy, we would get big 2 liter things of Slice, and we would stay up all night and just play World of Warcraft and Call of Duty and watch Family Guy and Robot Chicken, and it was just the best. This stuff was like if Slice was for the devil. It was like devil Slice. And it was orange, but it was so sweet, and it was also salty. And it was terrible. And I was like, what? I was like, I have to drink this whole thing? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, oh my God. But I knew because I had a colonoscopy the next day, I know it's a laxative. And so I'm like, well, what happens when I have to, I was like, can you unplug me from this stuff? Like, can I go to the bathroom? And she's like, nah. She's pretty much like, you got to shit in the bed. And I was like, wow. I was like, this is going to be a night. This is 11 p.m. I make it halfway through this 2 liter thing, and I'm like, I can do this. I was like, I made it halfway through. I was like, I got this. I can make this happen. So I'm halfway through this pitcher of Devil Slice, and she comes in and she's like, she's like, you've got to do 3 more. She gives me the 4. She's like, you've actually got to do, she tells me that what I think is that I have to do 3 more of these. She gives me the 4. And so I think I have to drink 4 of these pitchers. And I'm like, no way. And she's like, yeah. She's like, you got to do 4. And so I'm thinking I've got to do 3 more. And that thought just about crushes me. I'm like, no way. But I finish this one and I knock out. I wake up 2 hours later. It's maybe 1:30 a.m. And she's mixing up another batch. What I forgot to tell you was at 11, when she came in and we met, she hooked me up into a new IV thing. And I was like, what's that? And she's like, that's anti-nausea medication. This stuff is so gross that they give you medication so you can handle this medication. Anyways, she comes in, she mixes up the second pitcher, and I just stare at this thing. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, what? I realize it's one of those nights where I'm like, this is going to be, it's mental warfare. At this point, too, the laxative is kicked in. And so they don't let you go to the bathroom because it's protocol. They can't disconnect you from the machinery and stuff. So I have a bedpan. And so you have these like bouts of like crazy of the runs that you have to shit in the bed while you're hooked up to all this stuff. And it's not like they're there to like help you and like clean you and stuff. I just kept asking her for like paper towels. And then they'd have this button and so you're like shitting in the bed and peeing in the bed, obviously with like there's this little container thing, on a bedpan that's maybe like, I don't know, the size of like one of those big saucers that you make pasta in. And since it's a laxative, you got to do it a lot, right? You got to do it a lot of times. And so I'll pretty much have this like, you'll call the nurse in, and I know this is a tangent, but like the women in Colombia are beautiful. And especially I've got a thing for kind of like professional women, as it were. So these like beautiful Colombian women are coming in, these Colombian nurses, and I just feel so bad. They come in, I'm just like, I'm so sorry. Like, and they just have like clean up this like bucket of shit that I'm in. Like, it's just so, it's like a very humbling night. And it was really tough. And that second pitcher was like one of the hardest things I've had to do in a really long time. But I approached it like any interval training. I Googled it, and you're supposed to drink like an 8-ounce cup every like 20 minutes. And I was like, I'm not that type of a guy. I'm like, I got to just tackle the thing and just like go for it. And so I was like, I can approach this like I do my interval training. I'll be like 30 seconds on, 2 minutes off, or like 15 seconds on, 1 minute off. And my strategy was with the straw that came with the straw, that if you chomped the straw far enough down, you could swallow it without having to totally taste it. And because in a pitcher, your face is like in it. And so when I would be drinking it, and to breathe, I would have to either like turn my head away, or another strategy I found was they had this hand sanitizer that was potent and it was like flowery, but it was that alcohol flowery grossness was better than having to breathe in the liters of this stuff. And so I would be drinking with like holding my hand on the straw, and then I would like, if I had to breathe, I would just like smell the hand sanitizer, and then like keep drinking this like disgusting devil slice stuff. And this is a beautiful part about perspective, is maybe when I was 3/4 of the way done with that, and I was like, I'm not going to be able to do 2 more of these. I was like, I just can't do it. And a nurse came in after one of my crazy bouts, and she was like, no, she's like, you have to do 4 liters total. But she's like, you finish that and you're done. And so I thought she meant 4 pitchers, but those 2-liter things only did do 2. So I was almost done with the second one. And it was crazy. When she said that, I was like, the rest seemed like it was cake. I was like, I can do this. Plus, I knew that was the one thing standing between me and sleeping. So I was able to kind of get that down. I think I ended up shitting in the bed 8 times, 9 times, a lot of times. I had a little strategy down for that too. But it was a hard night. I think I finished that second one around like 3 a.m. and then I just knocked out. As much as you can in a hospital, the beeping and being connected to wires and having 4 liters of... The nurses kept coming in being like, why aren't you sleeping? And I'd be like, because you made me drink 4 liters of laxative at 3 a.m. So I was like, I'm having kind of a hard time here. That next day, had the colonoscopy. In the afternoon, just pretty much my whole time in the hospital, I'm not reading, I'm not watching movies, I'm not watching TV. I'm just like thinking about life. What got me here? Thinking about death, where I'm at with my life, and those are some thoughts I'll share later at the end of the pod. But the colonoscopy, they ended up giving me some drug. I'm not sure what this drug was, but it was potent. And so they wheeled me down to this other part of the hospital. I was stationed there, got ready for my treatment. They wheeled me into this other room. Um, and man, when those drugs hit, I was like, the way that I'll take these whenever I have like intense sedatives like that, I like to do it with my eyes closed. And so before they even give me the drug, I just close my eyes and then I kind of let it take me where it goes. And so I could feel them inside of me. And this is a really weird analogy, but I felt like it was a video game and I could feel something moving around inside of me. It wasn't painful, but it wasn't comfortable. But as it would move, so would like my visions. And it felt like I was almost in like a video game where like I was like an arbiter of some sort that was like roaming through a landscape. And as I would go through the landscape, there'd be like new like neon like vegetation would like spring up. And it was like all black, but all these like neon trees and shrubs and things. And I would kind of like come to a point and just kind of like stay a little stationary. And then as they would move the camera around, I guess, inside of me, I again, kind of like my perspective would move, almost like it was like some sort of a video game where they were like controlling me from inside of me. It was really weird. The vision itself was, although I just felt a lot of movement in my brain. It was like very odd, but it was, whatever those drugs are, it was potent. They finished that. I'm still out for like another hour. And then they wheel me back to my room. And I'm back to my room for hours on end, again, just kind of chilling in and out. And they come back and they say, hey, we figured out that they're like, had you taken any drugs before you came? And I told them about my little drug cocktail I had on Thursday. And they said that I believe this small intestine, the one that's below, there's one in the middle. I can't remember which one that is, but I think it's your small intestine is below, that was inflamed. And apparently my little drug concoction there had been some lesions on that intestine or something like that. And the drugs, there's a certain type of drugs, a family of drugs that has to do with like ibuprofen and naproxen, Aleve, that irritated the lesions. And like these had these like blisters that popped on the intestine. And because my low platelets, it just slowly bled. And I didn't have the platelets to like heal it up until I got to the hospital and they gave me more blood and more platelets and stuff. And then they're like, we're going to keep you for one more night, even though it doesn't seem to be bleeding anymore. We're going to check your levels in the morning. And if it's all good, then you can go home. Stay another night, third night. And in the morning, they take my levels and everything and I'm good to go. I still feel a little weird, but a lot better. And it was really strange, again, being in the hospital for kind of an extended stay and a couple realizations, and also with the payment. I forgot to tell you this too, but I think my first day there, after that first hard night, my first day, they came in and, in the States, they're normally like, you do everything, at least in my experience, you do everything, and then they foot you with the bill at the end. Here, the woman was like, we're going to charge you a lot of money. For me, it was a lot of money. It was about 10 million pesos, which I think like $3,000. And they're like, we'll charge you this, and then whatever you don't use, we'll reimburse you. But then they charged me, and they just like, I looked at my bill afterwards, and it was like all these tests and things because I have this really weird blood problem that I think they were trying to figure out. And it was a lesson that I need to create like a dossier on this blood problem. So when I show up to a hospital or anything, I can just be like, here's what it is. There are all these tests of strange things. I think they're trying to figure out what's going on. And it is what it is. But overall, the highlights, lowlights were, I think, always it comes to the places, people and places. And that little nurse lady who was my guardian angel made my stay. There was also the gastroenterologist guy was really sweet, and he ended up staying. He came after work one of his shifts, and we just chatted for a bit. And I told him I did music. He got my Spotify link, and just like he told me about like this vacation he went on. It was just cool. But the people that really made an effort, it was intimidating because it was almost all in Spanish. Except for a few doctors who would visit me maybe once a day, give me a little update in some English. But for the most part, everything was in Spanish. and the people that really cared and really tried. And I think that that little guardian angel lady was so sweet, and I could just tell really wanted to care for me and wanted to make make sure I got better, which was really heartwarming. And then there was one nurse that was really fun, and she would come in and she would like bathe me in the mornings and like pour water on me and stuff because they wouldn't let me leave the bed. And she was fun, and the gastroenterologist dude was really cool. And there was one nurse as well, one doctor, and she would come in and tell me what was going on in the mornings, give me like my little like briefing for the day in English, and that was really helpful. Hard parts were that one night with the laxatives and shitting in the bed was really tough, like really mentally exhausting. I also didn't eat pretty much the whole time. I couldn't eat except like they gave me some little Jello things. It was all gastroenterologist stuff, so gastrointestinal stuff. So I'm glad I practiced the fasting, but just being like super out of it, and then also like with the blood and being just like not being able to leave the bed, it was just like tough physically. And then I don't blame them because it's hard work and it's probably really frustrating to have someone who doesn't speak your language fluently. But there were definitely some nurses that like lost their patience with me, and that was hard because I know it's their job, and so I felt kind of bad like making their job even harder for them. But I could tell some people just thought I was an idiot because they would say stuff to me and then say it to me louder. Like I would understand when it's louder, and I'd be like, "Can you just say it a different way?" But the context of being in like a medicine, being in a hospital, there's so many words for like syringe and what an IV is called and what a spleen is called and like organs and platelets and like all these things that I just didn't know the words for those. And so that was tough, but made my way through it and figured it out. A lot of Googling after conversations and learned a lot of new words, learned what spleen is in Spanish, baso. Although it's still called a splenectomia, it's still called a splenectomy, but their word isn't a spleen, it's a vase or like a glass, which is interesting. So I think if that's right. But anyways, the last part of this was I spent a lot of time in there thinking. And like I said, thinking and feeling. And I didn't want to distract myself with anything because I just wanted to feel in the moments. Feel the needles, feel the pain, feel the frustration, feel the fear, and also feel the gratitude. I think this is the part I'm going to try to hold it together as much as I can. But I ended up accepting and feeling okay with death. And this is actually something I've been working on a lot over the last year. And a part of that is there's a lot of pieces to this idea. But one of them is it scares me a little bit in a way because of that kind of comfort of when you see any movie with The Rock or Brad Pitt or Gerard Butler or all these, when they got to save the world, they're always like, yeah, I want to save the world. And they're always like, but I'm saving it for my family, right? They're always like, I'm doing this courageous thing, but for my family. And it's like they go through hell and back for their family. And that was part of the reason why I got the vasectomy was I realized that I like the idea of being able to like move on if I needed to and not be on the hook. Like if you have kids, I think it's different. I think you fight more. Or if you have a partner, like a spouse or something, I think you like fight more. And I started to just question myself and wonder if I've taken this idea of disattachment or attachment too far, where I've really embraced the idea of like minimalism with objects in terms of living out of 2 backpacks, being more comfortable, just kind of like letting things come and go, being less attached to them, feeling like I'm Edward Norton in Fight Club when his apartment blows up and he goes to live with Brad Pitt, with Tyler Durden. and like that like shithole, and just being like, this is of like, he talks about like letting go of his apartment, and really embracing that idea of letting things go. I've been working a lot on letting go of um events, which is weird to say, but almost things of like my expectations for things, of how, or assigning meaning to things, of how it should go or could go, whatever, and just like however it went is how it is, and accepting that, and then assigning meaning to it intentionally. Meaning, one of the things I get frustrated with a lot is not being where I want to be in terms of my career, and of things I could have done, should have done, etc., mistakes. And I think that's a part of it, is learning that, first of all, everybody I think feels that way. Maybe not everybody, but I feel like a lot of people feel that way. That's not universal to me. And in doing so, this process of like learning to let go of things and expectations, I also think, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I've also kind of learned to let go of people, in terms of relationships, and more fluidity in that regard, of like that people can come into your life when you need them. Friends, you can be very close with somebody, and then if you've ever had a breakup, then you know what this is like. Someone can go from you being your best friend to a stranger relatively quickly, and embracing that more with friendships, where people kind of coming into your life, and I guess it's more like emotional minimalism, maybe, is what it is, but just being like, okay if things aren't forever. And I think some friendships, especially older friendships, people sometimes want them to be the way that they always were. But as people, we're always changing and developing and growing. So it makes sense that those friendships and relationships are going to change and morph as you do too. And so, but there's this idea, I think, of almost that's made in this, but hospital reflections, of maybe a feeling maybe like a little cowardly because of it, because I'm not on the hook for anything, for kids, dog, spouse. And so I think this idea around death, of being okay with it, is, and this idea of maybe feeling a little cowardly around it, is because it's not like I need to then, like I don't need to live for anything, which is kind of a scary thought. And I've also had the thought before, when death is close like that like I'd be okay restarting. And I feel like that's probably not a great place to come from, because it's almost like I'm like, I'd be down to give this another shot, And I think sometimes I get frustrated. I can get frustrated with maybe myself, and how things have turned out, and not exactly who I am, or with the cards I've dealt, any of that sort of stuff. And frustrated with the fact that I feel that way, because especially being in a place like a hospital, realizing that I have so much to be grateful for, and that I'm playing life on very easy as a white American man. I've got this card stacked in my favor, and I think that can be an interesting shift in perspective, of just trying to understand how much I actually have, and that like to maybe feel like this is more, to maybe not be willing to give it up quite so easily, and that I remember going through these small. I took a motorcycle trip with a friend when I was in Vietnam. We went from Da Nang up to Hanoi, and about 5-day motorcycle trip. Motorcycle, we were like these little scooters, but we would go through these really remote villages in Vietnam, really remote, and way out in the middle of nowhere, and there'd be like little boys and little girls, but I just remember for some reason a lot of little boys, and they would come out to the street is they'd hear you coming and like either wave to you or just kind of like stare at you. And we were both white, and so obviously it was just different. We had these big helmets on, and they would just be like, "Whoa!" You could just tell they're like, "What is this? What is going on?" And we'd go through, and they'd wave, and we'd wave. And in those little villages, like how the cards are so stacked against you in terms of like whether you step on a snake or a rusty nail, or it's like clean water. Just like there's so many, and you're so far out in the middle of nowhere that people have a lot of kids because a lot just don't end up making it. And it's like to make it through that, like how hard you got to fight to even make it through that type of a life, that like you really got to want it. And here I am kind of like with everything served up on a silver platter, and I'm like, I could give it up. That is kind of crazy to think about, but it's also very real. And I also think sometimes how real those feelings of regret and self-acceptance are, and how much I actively work on changing those and flipping those perspectives instead of like why me sort of a thing in terms of like the blood stuff or the spleen and the crashing, whatever traumatic events you have. You meaning me, I can only speak from my experience, is this idea of framing them differently. And instead, because sometimes I'll be like, it'd be really, I sometimes think I sometimes struggle with acceptance, self-acceptance of just like wanting to be normal, you know? And realizing instead that those events, we have the power how we frame them. And it takes a lot of work and working through this myself, but like of something like the blood just having this weird disorder, that it's actually because of this disorder, I think that has motivated a lot of my actions, because death has always felt right there, kind of just watching me. Like he's not sitting next to me, like staring me in the face like it was from the skiing accident, but he's just like across the room, just kind of watching me, kind of stepping a little bit closer. One of those things where you kind of glance up and it's getting closer, but you don't really realize it because you don't see the movement. It's so gradual. It's just every time you look up, it seems to be getting a little closer to you. That it's like, it's actually because of the almost dying shit. Whenever you get kind of close to that or something really real happens, even somebody close to you passing away, it helps me like pull out of the matrix and realize how special living is, because it's not guaranteed. And we're like, that's the only thing we're all guaranteed, really, is that we aren't making it out of this thing alive. Until Elon Musk finds a way to engineer that, like that's the one thing you can count on, is that we all are ending up in the same place eventually. And that it's because that our time is so limited, that's really what makes it so special. That like how many movies and books like Tuck Everlasting and shit like that are about when you can live forever, it becomes meaningless because none of these events hold any significance anymore. And that it's that piece alone that really, it's the fact that we don't get more of it that makes it special, and that makes it the most valuable resource, because it's the only one you can't make more of. And so having events like this and being in hospitals, you realize when death is a lot closer and you just can see reference points of it, I think it really helps wake you up. And I went in there feeling kind of frustrated, and in the bed, and you're connected to all this stuff, and shitting in the bed, and and it's like, and you just feel like just frustrated. And by the end, I think I left feeling still frustrated and scared, but also really grateful that it's been a good life, man. It's been a good life. And that you're never really promised tomorrow, even though it might feel like it. and that nothing matters as much as we think it does. And that, in those moments, right, I've got this dream of being a rock star, chasing the music stuff. But in those moments when I was in the hospital, this is where I think sometimes the detachment from things can sometimes shoot myself in the foot, that like none of that really matters. That like I could go right now. And people care. Obviously, I really appreciate that you all have reached out, but that it's not that big of a deal, which is, I think, scary. And maybe I need to work on my perception about life, but it's just interesting how willing I was to let it go in a weird way. And maybe I should work on finding a reason to be on the hook. That like maybe my mission isn't as important as I thought it was, because it wasn't like, I was like, I'm leaving behind. I didn't feel like I was leaving behind anything. Obviously, there's my family, y'all, but not like, I think it's different if you have kids. I think it'd be different. You know what I mean? Or if you had like a spouse or something, where this is, I almost feel like I'm already on borrowed time. So I already just feel like just kind of lucky to be here and to even have a chance to chase the dream. And that, I guess, really reinforces that concept too. It's very humbling that we all end up in the same place, right? Like I said, and how much when you're in that gown and you're stripped down and you're shitting on yourself, that like it doesn't matter what your career is, what you do, anything like that. Like how quickly you can become humbled very fast, and how quickly all of this can be taken from you, and how important health is, because when you can't move, to how quickly your body starts to I could feel my body already starting to like cave in on itself almost after 3 days of just being in bed. That is like, it's how important that is. And that the only thing that really matters is the day to day, and how to find content in the day to day, because the rest of it is fleeting. It's really fleeting. And I think is maybe part of this is also cultural, where a couple weeks ago I went on a date with two different people, and they both had brothers that were older brothers that were killed. They're both Colombian women, and they both were like, yeah, it was like, they're both older than me, but they're both like, that was kind of a thing. Like, they're like, this is not uncommon to just have older brothers that were killed. And the death, same when I was an age, like, I think death feels very heavy often, but that it's like the only thing that really is it's like the only other thing that is like a real part of life is death. And so it was just interesting kind of working through these ideas while I was there, and while it was a little bit closer again, and kind of stare me in the face again, of whether what I want to leave behind, or whether if what you even leave behind matters. Just a lot of that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, leaving, feeling incredibly grateful for the fact that I ended up born where I was born, to the people I was born to, for the opportunities that I've had. I think just the fact of being in the States, we don't even realize, is so lucky. Just to happen to be the place that you're born in is like 90% of the game. And I think I take that for granted a lot. And so it was a cool kind of wake up call again to appreciate life, appreciate where we are and what we got. And that so far, I've been able to escape it twice, maybe 3 times, depending on what you count. I've used 3 of my 9 lives, maybe 2 of my 9 lives, 2.5. Hopefully another 6 to go. And it gives me even more kind of a motive to just like live, to be present, and to do what you want to do, because it can all be taken from you in the blink of an eye because of some weird drugs that you happen to take on a Thursday afternoon. And that's the way that it goes. Thank you for tuning in. If you made it this far, as always, appreciate y'all. Excuse me. Sorry for the scare on the social media post. I should have made that more clear that I was already home. I was good, back in action. Thank you for all the love that you showed my way. And looking forward to the next chapter. I feel like I have a reawakening. Realize I got some things to work on. And kind of new direction, same goals. But we're going to get it. And hopefully new lease on life, per usual. That it's these moments that I think really make things special, because it keeps everything in perspective. Appreciate y'all. Check in a minute. Peace.